All right, in this section, we're going to be thinking about cities and the role they play in our lives, as well as the environment and the social effects of people on the environment. So, when we think about urban social problems and issues of population, part of where we want to start with is why do societies form cities? We see them throughout history. Um, how do we form cities? What goes on when a city forms? And then we're going to think a little bit about some of the problems with cities. When we think about what a city is, primarily what we're thinking about is a conglomeration of people in a particular geographical place. Um, Secondly, about the provision of services and infrastructure in that place to meet those people's needs. And why do they gather? If we think about cities throughout history, a lot of the time it happens because it is developed through trade in particular, um, and as a place where people gather to exchange goods and services. If you think about all of the things that go on within a city, it's often easier for people doing business or trying to conduct trade to have things they need within a city's limit, so to speak. So if I'm making shoes, if I'm a new up and coming shoemaker, I need services like banking. I need transportation. I might need space to make those shoes in. All of these services can be found readily at hand within the city. And this is often why cities formed historically. They grow out of commerce and exchange, and they tend to attract people to them. As we can see in the US, we have a fairly high amount of urbanization, and it's primarily concentrated in coastal areas. When we think about why this might be, these patterns of agglomeration or of adding people up into cities, again, we can think about things like trade and transportation being key aspects of any city. We see that from where the country was started on the eastern coast, the pattern of cities has stretched towards the middle of the country, but there's also a great part of the Midwest that is relatively unurban. It's a very rural area. As we'll see, the divide between urban and rural areas is very important. So if we think about something like Atlanta as an example, Atlanta began as the terminus of two major rail lines, and because of this, it became a major transportation hub of a lot of different southern industry, particularly cotton and other crops like rice that might have developed at the time. And the city began to grow as corporations founded here began to grow things like Coca-Cola and Delta. And as these companies and these services grow larger, more people are attracted to work for them. More people then need housing, might need grocery stores, need all kinds of things. So you can see there's sort of a cyclical pattern. Now, this concentration of people and services and businesses in one place can have some flaws, as we've seen in the current pandemic. Cities like New York, because people are so confined in terms of physical space, the disease tends to spread more easily there. But also, the entire city's economy is dependent on this elaborate network of services, restaurants, clothing stores, entertainment, office supplies. And once business shuts down and people shelter at home, we can see the whole lifeblood and economy of the city starts to shut down. It also points out that it's very difficult in the city environment not to interact with people, not to be near other people. So the process of urbanization follows the process of industrialization. As businesses grow, cities tend to grow around them as centers of what we call agglomeration. So for example, Detroit and some of the surrounding cities grew up around the automotive industry that was burgeoning there. New York and other northern cities grew up primarily around textiles early on, or clothing manufacturing. However, over time, if cities are not adaptive, cities can also have a tendency to decay, as we'll see in the next video, as centers of production tend to shift. So textiles were made in northern cities for a while, but then southern states started basically poaching that industry, and a lot of that labor moved south. But then, as global trade opened up, many of those cities began to struggle because a lot of that primary industry moved overseas. So the services of the city are also crucially important. As large industries grow and as businesses grow, we need things like trash collection, like water and electricity. We need to educate our children. So cities also serve as a vehicle for providing and organizing services, as well as organizing people.